Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. The title of today's lecture is Gangstalking as a Political, Military, and Social Rebellion. This is Emmanuel Isaiah Smith, your host, and today's date is Friday, May 29th, 2026. The time is at 10:50 a.m. and I'm in Miami-Dade County, Florida. Thank you for being here. And as always, ladies and gentlemen, I prefer to do these lectures outdoors. So please adjust your volumes accordingly, as I may have to raise or project my voice from time to time. Thank you for your patronage. Ladies and gentlemen, when you talk about clandestine gang stalking, it's beneficial to educate yourself on the potential motivations. All right, gang stalking is something that was not implemented simply for recreational purposes. It's not just something people do for fun. Now, there are a number of people, it's obvious to me, that participate in gang stalking signaling mechanisms when they're out and about because they think it's fun or exciting. And whether you're doing it yourself or whether you're doing it with friends who may know the signaling mechanism, or maybe you've taken your family on a family outing, and your family thinks it's a nice dinner out or a nice day out with dad or what have you, and you're doing signals with other stalkers so you can earn social credit while you're out with your family. I see all the time guys take their families out on stalking expeditions, and the family doesn't appear as if they know what's happening. But the guy does. The dad, the husband, the breadwinner has taken his family out. And under the guise of a nice day out with the family, he's actually doing signals and receiving signals from other stalkers so as to know who to approach or who to watch in the area, the target. I've seen guys walk away from their families, leave them at the food court or leave them somewhere while he goes 100 feet out looking for signals to send or receive. If there's a target nearby, he'll get a signal that there's a target nearby. The target will be pointed out, and then further signaling will be used to bring other stalkers into the area so they can descend upon the target. Okay, I've seen guys take their families out as a family unit, making them think it's just a nice day out. They're oblivious to the fact that the man of the house is out flinging and receiving signals from other stalkers during their family outing. And when the father starts acting strange or unusual or just plain bizarre in front of his family, doing these signals and receiving them and the resulting actions, well, they look on in horror. Well, little do they know that their husband, their father's sudden change in behavior during the outing had to do with his fellow stalkers that he's communicating with as to the whereabouts of any target or suspicious person. What makes a person do that? How is it that this state-sanctioned mechanism, which was never supposed to be found out but has, compels grown men, seemingly contributing members to society, to take their family out day or night on signaling expeditions? It kind of reminds me of that Chevy Chase film, Vacation. And then I guess there was a sequel, Christmas Vacation, where the dad, Chevy Chase, his character, takes his wife and kids out on an outing, and all these bizarre shenanigans take place during the family outing. Okay, that's an old classic. I highly recommend it. You should check it out. It's co-starring Goldie Hawn and quite a few other big names in Hollywood. Very funny film. I think it came out in the 80s. It's sometime in the early 80s. But that's what these guys look like when they take their family out on stalking expeditions. They look like the family from that movie, Family Vacation. They look like the family from Christmas Vacation. They look like the family from the original Vacation film, starring Chevy Chase. The actor and comedian, I'm sure you've heard of him. He was also in that movie Caddyshack with Rodney Dangerfield. Very good movie. But that's what some of these families look like, the ones whose dad takes them out on stalking expeditions. All right, they remind me of the family from the Vacation movie franchise. And I feel bad. I feel bad for the kids. And the reason I feel bad for the kids is because during their developing years, seeing stable behavior from their parents, who they are dependent on and know they're dependent on, even as young children, act in a way that is uncouth, unseemly, and just plain odd. The children have to witness that. The children have to witness that. They have to witness their dad in the presence of his wife, their mother, and them, the kids, use a state-sanctioned signaling mechanism that points him to people he is supposed to pester. A child grows up with those memories, ladies and gentlemen. You know, a kid never forgets the time they saw their dad flinging signals at strangers who send signals back, and then their dad does something bizarre, unusual, strange, or animalistic. Those kids grow up with those memories, and it's up to the dad to either lie to his kids and say, the reason daddy was acting so strange today at the mall or at the park or at the public library or at the grocery store or in the parking lot to the grocery store is because daddy's a gang stalker, kids. And I've been one for 38 years now. I learned when I was 15 and never looked back. And this is why I do what I do, and this is why I pray to Jesus every night about my stalking, to make sure that His Holy Spirit hasn't left me or this family because of the gang stalking activity that I'm involved in, kids. And then he turns to his wife, the stalker. He says, honey, I hope this doesn't make you look at me any less of a man. That I, your husband, the man who professed his profound love for you in front of all our family and friends and our church at our wedding, a man who is legally bound to you for the rest of my life, because I believe you're the woman for me. I hope that me being a gang stalker doesn't make you respect me any less as your husband. Okay, this is the stalker talking to his wife, ladies and gentlemen, concerning his signaling and on family outings. I hope this doesn't make you less attracted to me as my wife. That you saw me, your husband, the father of your children, the tie that binds this family together, prancing around in the shopping mart, sending and receiving signals from total strangers in front of you and the kids. I hope this doesn't make you remorseful about the decision you made for your husband and the man that you chose to settle down and start a family with. I hope this does not change your opinion of me, your attitude towards me, your husband, because you saw me, and so did my kids, in the parking lot of the Piggly Wiggly supermarket, throwing and receiving signals from people this family don't know. And when you saw me running around pestering people, wife, you're just going to have to understand, I as a gang stalker need social credit. I need to build credibility with my fellow stalkers and do what they tell me. That way they know they can trust me in the future. At that point, it's up to the wife to decide, well, should I do as the song says and stand by my man? Or do I divorce this nutcase and find a new husband? It's up to the wife to decide. And it's up to the kids to decide, do I want to model myself after a dad that does gang stalking in public? Or maybe I should find a new role model somewhere on TV or magazines or what have you. You see, it's up to the kids to decide that at that point when they find out their dad's a gang stalker. A man that uses a state-sanctioned signaling mechanism that pits one section of society against another section of society. And because gang stalking has been exposed, this family may have shame brought upon them. In their community for having participated in such thuggery, ladies and gentlemen. What compels people to do such a thing? You have many reasons. And there are many levels to gang stalking, and there are many operative protocols that are in place to make sure that it works, not only at the local level, but at the state and federal level too. Ladies and gentlemen, as I've always said, there's a political element to gang stalking. And there are military, sociological, and theological applications to why a person might participate in gang stalking. Maybe you think it's the work of Christ. Or maybe you use Christ as an excuse to do what you do to people. And not just on foot, but in cars. Some of you stalkers take signals, which leads you to somebody that you're supposed to either run over with your car or come just within inches of that person with your car. Synchronized vehicular obstruction of movement, using vehicles as weapons, all that stuff gang stalkers are doing, ladies and gentlemen, as a way to control society, as a way to engineer outcomes in society in order to control the trajectory of the path that society goes. The kinds of people you wish to succeed, you let them succeed. The kind of people you want to hinder, or the kind of people that certain persons in various governmental auxiliaries think should be hindered, put them in gang stalking campaigns. That'll block them from attaining life, liberty, or happiness, which are guaranteed rights that are provided to all U.S. citizens, natural born and immigrant, by the U.S. Constitution. If you are a legally designated citizen of the U.S., you have the constitutional right to pursue happiness, period. That's the sum of what the Constitution guarantees. The opportunity to pursue happiness. However you attain that: worship, free speech, the bearing of arms, political dissidence, voting, participating in the voting process, staying current on your taxes. All of these things that are seen as the pillars of a straight path forward in your trajectory through this world as an American. There are overarching philosophical documents. They're called the founding documents of this country: the Declaration of Independence, the U.S. Constitution, the Bill of Rights. All of these things are the overarching philosophical documents that govern the political, governmental, and social workings of this country. It all has to fall within the confines of what the Constitution allows. It's a tremendously well-written document, as is the Declaration of Independence and the Bill of Rights. They're tremendously well-written documents. Typically. And their words have meaning. Their words have meaning. What's a rebellion, ladies and gentlemen? A rebellion is when someone who is subordinate to an authority renders themselves as no longer subject to that authority. One example of a rebellion would be a mutiny. When you think of the period of exploration in this country, from approximately 1200 the year AD 1200 to around the year AD 1800. That 600-year period. You had persons from northern countries on these elaborate ships, and they were circumnavigating the globe, and they were going to other countries in other parts of the world and exploring those countries on behalf of the government of their own countries. Okay, so during this period called exploration, whether you're a Spaniard explorer, a Dutch explorer, a English explorer, an Italian explorer, a Mediterranean explorer, a Middle Eastern explorer, okay, with whatever category of those types of explorers that you find yourself in or you're observing, there were times during that period where on these trips that these explorers took on these ships to various destinations on behalf of the governments of their country. From time to time, the crew of the ship decided we no longer subject ourselves to the power of the captain of the ship, and we, the crew members, are going to take this ship over. And the captain has two options. He can either fight his crewmates with whoever will join him, or he can abdicate power and let them run the ship as the new captains. Okay, such a situation is usually characterized as a mutiny. Okay, where subordinate persons no longer subject themselves to an authority, and they act together under new leadership to remove that authority from power completely, so that he no longer has authority over them. So as is the case with the pirate ship, okay, the crew gets tired of the captain. One of them stands up and says, "I'll be the new captain. Let's remove Captain so-and-so from power." They successfully do that. That's called a mutiny. It's a form of rebellion. Okay, you no longer subject yourself to the authority of whoever's in charge, and you take power yourself. Okay, on a ship that's called a mutiny, typically it's called a rebellion, but in a government context, in a governmental context, if it happens to a country, for example, it's called a coup d'etat, where an armed faction takes power from the federal government. And it's happened in many countries. It's never happened in America. There was a failed coup d'etat that occurred sometime in the 1700s in the New England area. It was put down by one of the early American presidents. I'll have to look more into that. That just came to mind that the United States has been lucky. There's never been a coup d'etat here. Okay, no disgruntled group or disaffected group or disillusioned group of citizens has ever stormed the White House and assumed power for themselves in place of the president. That's never happened here, but it's happened in other countries. It's happened in many other countries, particularly in Central, South American, and Caribbean island countries. That used to happen a lot, where an armed group under a revolutionary leader storms the capital city in a rebel operation, and then stormed the city's government building and tells the leader of that country, "You're stepping down. We have new men in power, or we have a new political party in power. Yours is old, and you'll be subject to our commands from now on." That has happened time after time after time after time in South America and in Africa. I mean, throughout Africa, particularly in the 19th and 20th century in Africa, there were a ton of coups d'etats where armed groups would storm the main offices of their sitting president or premier, or storm the palace of their sitting premier, and essentially by force them to step down as you and your political party become the new rulers of that country. Okay, we saw a very potent example of this in the late 1930s, if I'm not mistaken, with Benito Mussolini, who would go on to become the president of, the premier of the corporate state Italy during World War II. Benito Mussolini stormed. He was an Italian man. He stormed Rome with an army of peasants that was so vast and so motivated that they were able to push through Rome, the city of Rome, past the forces of the sitting prime minister and into the main building, at which point they promptly, through the signing of improvised documents, made Benito Mussolini the new prime minister of Italy right then and there. Okay, he was a self-appointed prime minister, and through tight control of the political process in his country, particularly on opposition and dissent, he was able to reign undisputed for just under 10 years. He walked right up to the Prime Minister of Italy and said, "I'm the new Prime Minister. My name is Benito Mussolini. And today will mark the first day of my presidency over Italy." And the sitting prime minister said, "By whose authority do you usurp my seat in such a bold and brash way?" Mussolini replied, "I do it on the authority of the peasant army that I have accompanying me right here and now. The same army that pushed past the army of Italy right into Rome, right into where I'm standing right this very second in front of you." So, the king of Italy, and Italy had a king at this time. His name was King Victor Emmanuel III. He was brought in by Mussolini, and he was forced to draw up documents and sign them, stating that the new Prime Minister of Italy, starting that day, was Benito Mussolini. The new perpetual leader. Now, King Victor Emmanuel III stayed in power as king. It wasn't the title of king that Benito Mussolini was after. It was the title of prime minister or premier, or what we'd call a president. That's the title Benito Mussolini wanted. He gave him all the power in the country, including the power of the banks, the courts, the military, the police, and over the parliament, which passed laws based on a system of cronyism that all the citizens of Italy were subjected to forever. Okay? That is called a coup d'etat. Okay? It is a form of rebellion. It is a form of mutiny. Remember what happened on that ship? That ship from Deutschland to West Africa, or Deutschland to South Africa. The mutiny, the hypothetical mutiny of the crew members overtaking the captain, throwing him overboard, or keeping him incarcerated, and taking over that ship and its mission. That's a mutiny. And at the government level, someone takes power by force from the sitting premier. That's called a coup d'etat. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I assert and I submit to you that gangstalking is a coup d'etat of the societal function in this country, which will later lead to a coup d'etat of the political function in this country. And the only way such a coup d'etat could ever manifest is through the U.S. Army. The U.S. Army is the only entity in this country that has the resources and the know-how to mobilize demographics of people, to mobilize populations of people, to mobilize entire segments of people into a monolithic mindset in which they are semi-deputized by the state in such a way so as to whether or not they know that their activity is government, they participated in it anyhow because it is presented to them as a new status quo or the norm in American society right now. And given the wide scope of experiments that the CIA and the Department of Defense, particularly out of the 1950s, 60s, and early 70s, went to experiment on human persons is staggering. Okay? Those mechanisms are in play once again. See my lectures on MK Ultra, see my lecture on COINTELPRO, see my lecture on the Zersetzung. Okay, all those past programs that were exposed as essentially a government mobilization against its citizens in the name of behavior research. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, those mechanisms are back and in full effect right here, right now, right in the United States of America, and they are manifested in gangstalking, ladies and gentlemen. And do not be dismayed when you Google gangstalking and all these articles come back probably the first 10 or 20 articles that come back are articles concerning whether or not the people coming forward about it are nutcases. And how it is an unfounded practice. Some people call it fictional or a myth. That ain't nothing but the establishment's way of hiding the thing until they're ready to delete it, get rid of it. You see, discredit the people coming forward, and that will solve 50% of your problem right there. Because it diminishes credibility in the people coming forward, and it diminishes credibility in the topic itself, which deserves credibility because it runs at the federal, state, and local levels. So you have to consider the obvious with respect to why such a thing is unconstitutional. It's obvious on its face that a state-sanctioned signaling mechanism that becomes a norm for U.S. citizens in their daily lives ultimately lead to the harm of a targeted person in some way. So it is a rebellion of like-minded persons. Okay? Gang stalking has existed in the United States for a long time. But it's only been really talked about and broken down as an actual political topic in probably the last, I'd say 14 years. I think 2011 was the first year where intensive conversations on gang stalking on the internet forums began to happen. And people started writing books about it. I mean, I flipped through a few of the books out there on gang stalking by people who allege to be targeted individuals. And some of the books they write are they're negligent, a lot of them, to the stark reality of the thing. But I mean, obviously there are some books that are more or that are better written than others. There are some books that are better written than others. However, typically and ultimately, I've yet to see one that was genuine and comprehensive enough to grab my attention past maybe 4 or 5 pages. All right, different people have different writing styles. Different people have different communication styles. It seems to me that a lot of the books on gang stalking out there that you can purchase like on Amazon or a similar website are they're more of an entertainment medium than an informational medium. It's like these persons writing these books on gang stalking are trying to entertain the audience, which there's nothing wrong with entertaining the audience. Just get the message across in a comprehensive way so that the audience knows more after reading your book than they did before reading your book. But, ladies and gentlemen, when you talk about rebellion, it doesn't have to be something. It doesn't have to be something as easy to see or easy to register as the storming of the Capitol on January 6th all those years ago. That was a rebellion. It didn't appear that those people were trying to take the government over, but I'm sure that those possibilities were weighed by the Pentagon. Now, Excuse me 1 second, ladies and gentlemen. So that was a rebellion. All right. I submit to you, ladies and gentlemen, that any mechanism that is adopted by a population that allows them to communicate secretly with one another so as to affect outcomes in business and in society, that's rebellious activity, because you're controlling people's actions and opportunities without a legal mandate to do so. All right, there are no documents out there that you can search online that outline and authorize the use of gang stalking and its tactics. And mind you, gang stalking has a lot of names. It has gang stalking, cause stalking, hate stalking, community harassment, and covert war as well. Some have called it organized mobbing. There's a lot of things you can call it. But it remains the same either way. And any mechanism that could be implemented in the states could affect the politics of this country. It could affect the economy of this country. It could affect this country's military, and it could affect the society of the country in the interest of whatever these stalkers are after, control. If you control the individual, if you could control enough individuals, you could control the job markets. You could control political matters. There's a lot you could control. There's a lot you could control. That's a rebellion. Why? Because the Congress hasn't authorized the use of anything that resembles a signaling mechanism to control outcomes, to control people, to control targets. There's nothing on the books that authorizes that. So for people to participate in it, they're doing it without the legal authority to do so. And because this program has the ability to infiltrate governments, federal, state, and local, and change them, it is in many respects a coup d'etat. And without knowing enough about it, without understanding it, our elected officials, our Supreme Court justices, are not going to be able to make sound decisions on its implementation and how to get rid of it. Okay, see my lecture on remedies. Okay, how to get rid of gang stalking, and I outline political and social mechanisms on how to get rid of gang stalking. See my lecture on the how to remedy gang stalking. So I'd like to see the federal establishment of this country educate itself on gang stalking, have debates about it on the Senate floor, get testimonials from people who say they've experienced it, and go to the Department of Defense and the Department of Justice with a plan on how to get rid of it. All right. Court cases are decided a lot of times with signals. You don't think that a prosecutor could send a signal to a juror telling them to vote guilty instead of not guilty in the deliberations? You see, can a judge take a signal from a juror as to how to rule on a motion? Yes, of course they can. Of course they can. Part of gang stalking is also the use of earpieces. I wouldn't doubt if there are political candidates that wear earpieces during debates and stump speeches, and a third party is telling them everything to say to the American people. Can you run a campaign that way? Absolutely. You pay the right third party for that equipment, and for the use of that equipment in such a way you can get what you ask for. Can teachers send signals to students concerning what answer to put down on a test on test day? The answer is yes. A teacher can send a signal to a student on test day to help them cheat. And no matter how disgusting that is, or how troublesome or meddlesome that is, or how unneeded or unnecessary or silly or even stupid that is, it is done in classrooms across the country, and we're talking college classrooms too. Ladies and gentlemen, can a hiring manager at a government research lab receive signals and verbal commands from interested third parties as to who to hire and who not to hire after you've interviewed each applicant? Yes, of course, that is used. And that I can promise you. It is a coup d'etat of society, ladies and gentlemen. It's a coup d'etat of the political mechanism. It's a coup d'etat on your rights and freedoms as an American citizen. And a lot of these units that run around here looking for people to pester and nothing else. You know, these are street gangs. These are thugs. Regardless of if you're a recognized street gang, you could live in a $5 million home somewhere. Okay, it doesn't matter what your socioeconomic background is. If you participate in a signaling mechanism when out in public that is meant to harm other people, that is, in many respects, gang activity, period. It doesn't matter. You could be the valedictorian of your high school. If the next day you're using signaling mechanisms to bother or pester people, you're a street thug. And a lot of you together are a street gang. You're an undeclared street gang. That's what gang stalkers are. They're an undeclared street gang. And they have covert systems of operation, covert verbal mechanisms, and covert signaling mechanisms that help them operate. Okay, gang stalking is a suitable term for this because the people that are constantly confronting you as you go about your day are a gang. They are a group of people that operate with a common objective, and that's to find and locate targets to pester. That's gang activity. And they stalk people. Okay, gang stalkers don't just harass you in the streets. They also steal your data. They poke through your emails and text messages. They poke through your phone records, poke through your bank accounts, poke through your academic records, poke through your address history. They steal vital information from you like your date of birth or social. simply because it gives them an ego boost to be able to do that to somebody without punishment. So ultimately, ladies and gentlemen, gang stalking is ugly business. It's ugly for the people who participate. Okay, you're participating in exposed activity. And what a joy that exposition has been. I've had a blast exposing gang stalking. Once I realized that what I was experiencing all those years ago was organized and had a mechanism, well, that's all I needed to know to start my own programming process in exposing gang stalking. It's dirty business. It's dirty business. And people participate in it because they think that it's the right thing to do, or they think that it's the best thing to do, or maybe they think that their activity is helping and not harming society, but you're brainwashed. You've put your trust in people, other stalkers, who communicate using a signaling mechanism so no one can hear what they're saying. Why? Because a lot of them use gang stalking and its signaling mechanism to do dirt. Okay, horrible criminal actions. Not only out in public, but in the workplace, in churches, in public facilities, and outside those same facilities. All of these things. The legal system is used against targeted persons as well. There are some gang stalkers out there that have police liaisons that assist them with their signaling mechanisms. And some police do favors for stalkers. See my lecture on my situation with the Miami-Dade Public Library System and the Miami-Dade Sheriff's Department. Apparently the Miami-Dade Sheriff's Department is doing favors for the Miami-Dade Public Library System and trying to get me physically harmed or incarcerated for anything or nothing at all. All right, I got these guys trying to pin stuff on me that they know I didn't do to please the library system. Okay, I see collusion and I see corruption. Okay, I see a violation of my civil and constitutional rights with that collusion that the library and the sheriff's office are doing. And when I say the sheriff's office, I don't mean the entire sheriff's office. There are a handful of officers that have been assigned to me in some operation that they have going, to the nature I have no clue. The nature of I have no clue. But I've sniffed them out. And I've reported them to a lot of places. And it's obviously a co-op between the library and the sheriff's office. Is that constitutional for a library system and a sheriff's office to collude to physically harm or incarcerate a person who is not in commission of a crime? That is called thuggery. It's called cronyism, and it's called a waste of the taxpayers' time and money. All right, coup d'etat, ladies and gentlemen. There is no government agency in the country that has not been permeated and affected by the signaling mechanism known as gang stalking. All right, if you could control the courts, the political process, the military, and society by implementing a one-size-fits-all signaling mechanisms that pits you against persons who don't use that signaling mechanism, well, then you are in effect imposing your will over and above the will of the people. And the reason I say that is because, first of all, our government only exists because of the consent of the governed. Okay? People consent to being governed in exchange for the reciprocal relationship that every citizen has with its government. The citizen pays taxes, the government implements policies so as to use that tax money to the benefit of the voter. So ultimately, that's what you have, ladies and gentlemen. It's a coup d'etat. You can affect the political process. You can affect the military with this. Okay, I wouldn't be surprised if there are generals, captains, and lieutenants in our armed forces that have access to these mechanisms and use them if they so choose. I don't think it's quite right if one segment of the population is able to wage an undeclared war on another segment of the population. The only thing separating the two is a signaling mechanism and similar protocols which allow them to identify people who are supposed to be harassed or attacked or otherwise harmed. So, ladies and gentlemen, what we have is a rebellion. I mean, in my estimate, it's 50 million people involved in this. If you could take signals from other like-minded people and you work together to create outcomes in political, military, economic, educational, or social affairs, okay, you are effectively controlling the masses without their will or consent. And yes, this Gangstalking program does go into the highest reaches of government. Ladies and gentlemen, that is a coup d'etat. It's a coup d'etat without arms. It's a mutiny without arms. It's a rebellion without arms. And the more people participate in this, the more it will be seen as the status quo and the norm, and will eventually alter the trajectory of this country for better or for worse. Thank you for tuning in, ladies and gentlemen.